Good luck, guys.
Thank you. Can you please assign me to be the captioner?
Thank you for the reminder.
All right, everyone, it's 9 o'clock. I can wait a few more minutes, although it does look like we have a lot of people here. As Greg sent out yesterday, he is here. So I will run things in case something changes, but Greg or Leah or anyone on who wants to prompt me, feel free to make any corrections because I've only done this one time before.
You're going to do awesome, Mandy.
Yeah, I agree. It will be great. And I will do my best, but I am also no expert. So I will
While we're
help.
waiting for everybody to come on, I just wanted to give some real praise to Owen. He was our guest speaker on the 18th for our professional development day, and he did mini sessions with our teachers and could not have gotten more positive feedback about applicable tips to do directly in the classroom during, sensitive conversations, how to address people not being what they should be, really opening up people's eyes to things. And I'm just really impressed with how it went.
Thank you, Mandy.
All right. So just wanted to do the reminder that because we have a lot of guests today, To make sure all voices are heard, we want to make sure that instead of raising hand, just put into the chat whether you have a comment or a question, and then we can address you in order. Kathy, I know you did this last time. If you'd like to give me a heads up if I miss a few people, that would be wonderful. And welcome everybody. It's really nice to see all the faces, even though it's on Zoom. So at this time, is there any public comment? I'm not sure if we have any guests with us, but this would be the time for public comment.
We didn't have anybody request public comment ahead of time, but we do have visitors here, so we can definitely pause and see if any of our visitors have public comment. If not, Mandy, we do need to do roll call.
Okay. Okay, well, we did the good amount of wait time. Roll call. Leah, are you doing that, or is that something I'm doing?
I will do that for you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. If when I call your name, you could give me a verbal acknowledgement of your presence, that would be very helpful. I'm going to go alphabetically, starting with Owen.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Zainab.
Good morning.
Good morning. Eva.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's nice to see everybody. Tony.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning, Tony. Gigi.
Good morning.
Good morning. Kathy.
Good morning.
Where are you? There you are. Good morning. Angela.
Good morning.
Good morning. Ben.
Good morning, everybody. I'm here and feeling very light and free.
Are you done with all your finals?
No, I just am still riding high from Tuesday, so
good.
All good.
Lisa.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Raymond.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Ruth.
Hi, everyone. I'm here.
Good morning. Ruth, I got your email and yes to all those things. I'm sorry I haven't responded yet.
That's fine. Absolutely.
Mandy.
I'm here.
Oh, good. Oh, of course. Craig.
I'm here. Let me also thank Mandy for stepping in last second here. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all the concern. You will be happy to know my daughter is currently her sassy self. So, you know, she's recovering quickly.
That's good to hear. And Mark.
And I'm never going to get tired of saying this. Happy New Year 2021.
Happy New Year. And Jeff.
Morning, everybody. I'm here.
Morning. And we'll introduce our guests a little bit later in the agenda when we get to that section. So for right now, I'll pause on that and turn it back over to Mandy.
Okay, at this time, we need to review and approve the December minutes. After looking at the minutes, was there any concern that you would like to put in the chat, a question or a comment about the December minutes? And Leah very nicely put that into the chat if you need to do a quick click on that. Okay, seeing no comment or question, would anyone like to move to approve the December minutes?
I can make a motion.
Okay. I saw Jeff Whittle make the motion. Would anyone like to second?
I can second it,
Mandy
Mandy.
for second.
Thank you.
And any, so at this point, if we would like to approve the December minutes, can you respond by saying aye?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? So the December minutes are approved. So the next
Thank
part
you.
of our agenda is an introduction of our student and parent guests. Can I turn that over to Jeff to introduce, as these are his guests?
Mandy, I'm so sorry. I need 1 minute for a technical pause.
Okay.
Kelly and I are having a little trouble with our minutes document. We are in separate documents, so we need to resolve that. I apologize. Just 30 seconds and I'll get this straightened out.
Well, as that's happening, was anybody able to get vaccines? Raise hand if you got one. So representatively, we have about a third of us, maybe?
Marcus and Eva, anyone in Wayne County, were you guys able to do so to get your vaccines?
No, I have not. No.
It's a little bit of a mess. Oh, well, you guys are, if you're in Detroit, it's a different health department. Yeah, Wayne County's a mess. So.
Right. No. Mm-mm.
I was able to get mines at Cobo, in and out. It was real organized, and it was pretty good. I even streamed it to my class. And so the students were waiting for like a third arm to grow out my neck, and they were having to watch me.
I will say that I've got mine on the 11th, and just last night, my arm got red and hot, just out of nowhere. I was like, oh, okay, no side effects. And then a week later, but I don't care.
I'm all set, Mandy, when you are. Thank you.
All right, so at this time, Jeff, would you mind introducing your guests for us?
Sure. Leah, Tom Leitz is going to need to be the host for that. Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Before I introduce them, I just want to let you guys know just a little story. I had shared with our subcommittee a Macomb Daily article that was about this group that we're going to hear from today. And it was Lisa that wrote me and said, man, they would be so great. It would be so great to have them as part of our student initiative here on the council. So I want to give a really big thanks to Lisa for having that idea. And we started talking and communicating, and Lisa knows Tom. And so this worked out. It was kismet, I would say. This is wonderful. Okay, good morning. I'm happy to introduce the team representing Utica Community Schools Wellness Committee, and specifically the Utica High School Student Mental Health Committee, who will be sharing their work with us today. Joining us via Zoom to present to us this morning, our Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Robert Monroe, Utica High School Principal, Mr. Tom Leitz, and of course, our stars, two representatives of the Utica High School Mental Health Committee, Senior Allison Smith and Junior Sophia McGuid. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Monroe, and thank you guys for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate the warm introduction. I also want to thank Dr. Rivard for keeping Utica Community Schools in front of her and making that recommendation. So thank you, Lisa. Really appreciate that. You know, Jeff, just before I get started, I also want to make note, we have two of our Board of Education members on the line with us today as well. Dr. Mary Thomas, our President of our Board of Education, and Dr. Stephen Meyer, trustee. So they're very supportive and certainly view social emotional learning and mental health as being a very, very important part of what we do in Utica Community Schools. So I really want to thank them for being with us and being on the call today. And certainly we appreciate the opportunity to share the work of our schools. I wanted to take a quick moment just to share the context of our district with you. Utica Community Schools is Michigan's second largest school district, taking in all parts of 6 different communities in Macomb County and the municipalities that we serve. We're a diverse district, both culturally and socioeconomically, that meets the unique needs of our students. And our students really do reflect this type of diversity. As I mentioned, under the leadership of our Board of Education, we recognize very early the importance of social emotional learning with the rapid change as we moved into remote learning. As you will hear, this includes giving our schools, teachers, and parents the tools they need to help our students address the complex personal issues they faced during this pandemic environment. What you'll hear this morning is not only the extension of this commitment, but also a long history of our district that has to embrace student voice, promote acceptance, and care, most importantly, for the whole child. Here to introduce our students, and also the presentation today is going to be Mr. Tom Leitz, Principal of Utica High School.
Well, good morning, everyone. I apologize for speaking because I know you want to hear from our students, but the 2 young ladies that are doing the presentation asked if I would give the background because they said it's not fair. We weren't there, Mr. Leitz, so give some context to it. So it's truly a privilege to introduce these two young superstars. But before that, our wellness journey at Utica High School began quite some ways back. And I could go back further to my first years there, where we started a Utica United, a Gay Straight Alliance program to help with some of our students who felt like they weren't accepted into our community, to our partnership with MDE, with the African American Young Men of Promise initiative that we began back in 2014 and worked through the first few cohorts of that. We've tried to do things to recognize that we've got various groups that need different supports. Mrs. Bronski, who's one of the counselors who, if there's any questions from the counseling end, is on here later, started a wellness club about 3 years ago, which really started our focus on a daily time for kids to start doing things to find yoga, mindfulness practices, and other things. We then paired with University of Michigan to join the Trails Initiative, Trails for Wellness, which brought some curriculum to that process with small groups. But we didn't realize until we started having conversations with others how much we were missing by not bringing the student voice into it, which is something that I've been committed to for a while, but somehow ended up in my blinders on this one. A wonderful conversation with a fellow board of directors member from MASSP, Dr. Sophia Lafayette, who was at the time the associate principal of Walled Lake Northern, now is director of early childhood through K-12 with Romulus Schools, talked about You Matter Week and this whole school focus on learning directed by students. Mrs. Bronski went over to Royal Oak High School and saw that. So I say this because I think we have some great ideas, but I want to make sure that we're acknowledging that we stand on the shoulders of lots of other giants, teachers, students, and people in education who have started this work and that we're learning from. So we're honored to share, but we share in honoring those folks who have guided us. As that pandemic occurred, I became involved with a couple of committees in Utica Community Schools with a large district trying to bring in teachers, counselors, and other support personnel, both for social, emotional, and mental health, as well as our equity committee. And again, we knew that we had to bring students into that program. So over the summer, I put out an email to my students asking them if they would like to be the student leaders in this process. And without further ado, what I'd like to do is turn it over to two amazing young women, our senior, Allie Smith, and junior Sophia McGee, who are going to take this presentation and talk about the important part, what they're doing. So ladies, the show is yours.
Hello, everyone. Members of the Governor's Educators Advisory Committee, Mr. Monroe, and those watching via the internet, we are incredibly grateful to have this chance to share our short but timely journey as wellness warriors at Utica High School. Thank you for the opportunity to do so.
And like Mr. Leitz said, my name is Allison Smith. I'm in the 12th grade, and I've been wanting to join a mental health committee for a while, considering that I struggle with my own mental health. And I just saw an opportunity here at Utica, and I just want to let people know that there are people out there who can help and who will hear you, and that there are healthy coping methods to use.
My name is Sophia McGee, as has been said, and I'm a junior at Utica. I became interested in the mental health committee first because of the battles that some of my loved ones and myself have had to put up against mental health struggles. Moreover, involvement here coincides with one of my passions to be of service to others, especially when recognizing the great need to address mental health in today's culture. As Gandhi once said, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Initially, when we heard about the pandemic and the shutdown that would soon ensue as a result, to us high schoolers, that meant an extended spring break.
And I remember that it wasn't until my parents were participating in the manic buying that I felt the need to keep up with the news and monitor the world.
My sister came home from college prematurely, and both of my parents were working on the front lines as healthcare professionals. There were a lot of emotions coming from all different directions. Anxieties definitely picked up. We had to face it. It was okay to not be okay.
Fast forward to the summer, when we got the news that we won't be going back to in-person school in the fall, I recognized how this is an appropriate response to such an unprecedented and dangerous pandemic. However, there was a new opportunity presented, an opportunity to open the conversation about mental health through a committee at Utica. This is mostly to help our peers and ourselves get through this.
Then, a few weeks later, we found out that we were accepted and got on to our first task, a virtual mental health summit to be attended at the beginning of October. The Student Mental Health Summit was held by the Michigan Association of Secondary Schools Principals in partnership with the Michigan Association of Student Councils and Honor Societies. They allowed us to personalize our schedules quite a bit through a menu of options so we could divide our team and consume as much information as possible.
One of the main companies that was presenting at this summit was NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Health. And they gave us a real perspective on all of the mental health issues and problems that are presented today through the use of various forms of data. And we also went to the parade of ideas from different high schools across the state of Michigan, where we learned a lot along the way.
Yes, and in addition to the Wolverine Support Network peer-led support groups and learning the science and effects of addiction, I attended an anti-bias training that really opened my eyes about the spectrum that exists with regards to mental health struggles and confrontation. The conference included such a wide range of people that gave way to an even wider range of perspectives that stimulated many conversations. As a result of that summit, a flame was lit in the minds and hearts of each one of us that we had a duty to bring a positive change back to our school. Thanks to the work of those brilliant presenters at the summit, our committee's toes were wet and we are ready to dive in. It was a priority to make sure that this group was representative of our school at large. Numerous members are involved in a number of other outside activities or none at all. Yet the greatest importance comes with our shared passion for mental health and well-being. We have worked hard as a team to create an environment where we feel comfortable enough to have open and honest conversations, both student to student and student to staff. In fact, us students tend to begin our meetings without supervisors present when the supervisors are caught up with other commitments. Their encouragement, though, is definitely what enabled this to become a student-led initiative. Yet they are also who to blame for having such a tongue twister of an abbreviation, the UHS SMHC. Our meetings are facilitated on Microsoft Teams, and we tend to use some of the same tools that we utilize in our academic classes, such as the OneNote notebook and its accompanying collaboration space.
A big part of our community is actually delegating responsibilities because we don't want to bring ourselves down by trying to support the community and ourselves. We separate the work according to what resonates best with each student or counselor, so it would be the most genuine type of work given. For example, if someone knows of a TED Talk that they have listened to before, we like to share it throughout our social medias. Our overall intended audience is the students and staff at Utica, hoping that it will eventually spread to their families and loved ones. Even a small impact to know that is big enough to know that we are making a difference.
Our first major effort was based on a presentation from Work to Be Well, an organization in Oregon. They shared their creation of a mental health toolkit that includes sounds, smells, sights, things to touch, people, and actions meant to ground you. The senses are the focus because they are very primitive functions that nearly all people can tap into in some capacity. It is important to take a second here to admit that we are not trying to solve serious mental crises because we are not trained to do so. However, we are merely trying to share mindfulness techniques meant to help people. Existing in our toolbox, these strategies can be repeatedly revisited and should be updated to remain relevant. Whatever the case, this strategy is meant to cause a lot of introspection because it is the most helpful when personalized. To spread this idea to our school, our team set a tool for each week. Then one person would gather different related resources and articles that would be sent out in our Friday newsletter. Then another person or group of people could work together to construct a video that went more into depth on the specific tool and gave examples. These were shared in Mr. Leitz's Monday video announcements, and we ended up getting such positive feedback from so many people. So you're looking at a sample of what my toolbox might look like. In the top left, you can see the album cover to Hurts to Be Human by Pink, because she is definitely an artist that makes me feel resilient. Other sounds that you might want to include could be the crunch of snow or white noise, or if you play an instrument, you could make your own sound. Hopping down below that is an image of my sister, my cousin, and I, because these are some of the people that make me feel very grounded. Though to you, maybe it's your dad, your neighbor, or your super cool Aunt Martha. Above that is an image of my puppy Louie, who I tend to utilize for the sense of touch. Beside that is an image from Hawaii, and different sites such as this can bring you to a very calm place. Maybe for you that might be looking at quotes or old pictures or nature. If we could all just take a second right now to direct our attention to a nearby window and take in just how beautiful the world really is. Next, there's a field of lavenders, which goes for my smell. Essential oils, or maybe even the campfire or the fresh smell of a book could be it for you. Then below that goes for actions. And for me, this is dance. Dance brings me to the most mindful place where I am present in the moment. One's toolbox tends to have a lot more meaning to oneself than it may to an outsider, especially because personal associations and memories tend to have a lot to do with what feels the most appropriate to be included.
Our second initiative to enhance our toolbox was to introduce the 12 Days of Wellness modeled after the 12 Days of Christmas leading up to exams. It all started with the wellness wheel that we found out about through the Mental Health Summit. In this wheel, we have all 12 days in each slot so that each student can continue to use them when they need a little pick-me-up or they just need something to do. We ended up dividing the work between the committee members and counselors by picking which ones we all wanted to do. All of our days are currently posted on the Mental Health Committee's social media with topics ranging from healthy habits to study tips. Pictured is some examples of our posts. To the left is our day one, which is complete an act of kindness that Sophia actually posted. This ended up being used in one of the district's Monday moments. To the right is our day 8, which is clean your study space and other study tips that I actually posted. I gathered all the tips from several teachers, test prep books, and other educational videos. One thing to note is that there is some sort of article or news post for all of our 12 days of wellness. The district actually started off their UCS wellness based off of our work and other work from the other schools and meetings, except they took what we did to the wellness of the district and, oh my gosh, to the wellness of the district and to more of the community level. For example, the I Matter chain presentations, the Monday moments, and the calming room.
One of the coolest connections that we have had the privilege of making in this process was with Ms. Charland, our Director of Secondary Programs. From day one, she has led our collaboration with the central office leadership by working with us to find our vision and then expanding it throughout the district. We're going to take a look at how that happened here. On the left is an example of one of our Monday moments, which all originate from Every Monday Matters. These are themed weekly memos that include a quote, thought-provoking tidbit, and a challenge to put the skill into action. I really look forward to using these every week, and I can also tell that my teachers and classmates benefit from them too, especially when we use them as bell ringer assignments. Next, the virtual calming room is another installation this year. It compiles countless resources from so many places to help ground members of the UCS community. There are many choices available to ensure that what time one has to devote to their social emotional health can be used efficiently. For example, my Spanish teacher loves the live animal cameras, while I tend to take use of the meditation and breathing links. Finally, there is a snippet of the I Matter guide in the top right corner. The Matter chain presentations are a sequence being shared by the district to take a look at mental health from various levels. Each step has a written guide as well as a public presentation in which there are psychologists and other professionals who can respond to viewers' questions, comments, or concerns. The first tier was I Matter, which focuses on parents taking care of their own mental health. The second tier is You Matter, which happened just this past Tuesday, and it helps parents navigate elementary as well as secondary mental health. Our committee is currently helping to construct the We Matter. This is the third tier, and it hones in on adolescents helping themselves. It's scheduled for mid-March. A final We All Matter presentation will round it out later in the school year by addressing how students can help each other. Overall, the UCS Wellness page is such an incredible base of information, and the best part is it's constantly growing. Essentially, these actions are steps towards constructing a holistic approach to teaching by caring for the entire student.
Our next big committee-wide project in our schools is our You Matter Week starting on March 8th. Some ideas that we are currently working to put into action are lunch with your counselors as a rant space and a check-in both academically and mentally, a coping skills card modeled after one by Easter Seals, Michigan, pictured to introduce more healthier habits, mindfulness training for a better mindset, and we're also going to try to get some guest speakers from the Mental Health Summit and other organizations. Finally, an I Matter wall to give more motivation and more reasons to just keep going.
With the onset of this new year, our newest project revolves around emotion charting. There is a box to be filled for each day in a year to correspond with the most prominent emotion that filled that day, be it purple for anxious, blue for sad, yellow for happy, or orange for confident. This technique forces you to really consider the bigger picture of a day as well as a year, and it can reveal patterns about mental health over longer stretches of time. Next, we are hoping to draw attention to the varied difficulties in mental health across demographics, such as race, ethnicity, religion, and sexual orientation. For example, by a presentation about toxic masculinity. We are planning to devote serious consideration into the preparation of this presentation because we want it to be well received by our community. Lastly, instilling the ability to handle one's own or someone else's mental health crises by being able to identify the signs and act appropriately so as not to aggravate a problem. When talking about mental health, there must be someone to start the conversation, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable, if we ever want the stigma to be replaced by openness. If anyone listening today or in the future is thinking about breaking the ice surrounding mental health, my advice would be to stop thinking about it and just do it. The UHS SMHC would like to be of help in any way that we can. Our projects are yours to replicate. These and many other resources can be found both on the UCS Wellness page and our committee's social media. Even the smallest seed will grow out in all directions and make an unprecedented impact, some of which the origin may never see. Yet the impact matters nonetheless, whether it is on a single person or an entire community. That's the mindset that our committee continues to function on. And finally, to anyone out there struggling with their mental health, we are directing this message to you. It's okay to not be okay, and you will never be alone in your fight. Us chieftains will always be there to fight right alongside you. Thank you.
Thank you guys very, very much. That was wonderful. I guess we would move on to the Q&A portion of this presentation. And I would just like to say before we do that, it was wonderful, wonderful information. What an amazing program. But specifically, Allison, I just want to say something to you, to how you started admitting that you were having your own struggles. That was very powerful to me. And I think that was very powerful to a lot of people, to admit that you struggle, like so many, like you're not alone, like everybody else right now. And for me personally, and what I've gone through in my schooling and in my life, that meant a lot to me. And I just want to thank you for being so open and so brave in saying that. So thank you guys very much. And we'll move on to the Q&A section.
I believe Ben was first with a comment.
Well, first of all, Sophia and Allie, excellent, excellent job. I'm just floored, and I'm so proud of both of you. I don't know you, but I'm so proud of you. So proud of both of you. And I'm just going to piggyback off of what Mr. Whittle said. Yeah, I mean, the first step in a lot of breaking that stigma of mental health is talking about your role in it, and saying things like, yeah, I'm struggling with my own mental health. So I think that's the best invitation I think we can give the community. The comment I have for you is, I am so impressed with this resource because it has so many specific things. There is so much here that would speak to so many different individuals and situations. I just love it. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you only had a couple of those resources, still an amazing thing. But to have this parade of really specific things, the countdown to final exams, the 12 days of wellness and things like that, that's just brilliant. So congratulations. And I have a feeling this is going to get even bigger than it is, which is probably the best case scenario. So great job, Sophia and Allie, and thank you so much for your presentation.
Greg, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, thanks again to the whole team. In addition, thanks, Mr. Leitz. You did an outstanding job introducing these two outstanding young women too. So I have a question. I'm in Howell Public Schools, and we actually have a similar initiative. I think we had some students at that same conference that you had the chance to attend. So as people start to roll these things out, are there any early lessons, like bumps in the road, that we should anticipate? Things like that? Thank you.
It looks like Jeff had a question.
Hi. So I guess my question is, it's a wonderful program, and Utica is such a large district. To piggyback kind of off of what Greg was saying, I'm just curious as to districts that don't have the internet connectivity that Utica has, in their area. Also, funding on this council, so much of what we do and so many wonderful ideas and initiatives are always tied to funding. What are some funding issues that schools might have to run these types of programs to get these out to schools? If they're going to roll something out, what might be some of those kind of roadblocks that Greg spoke to? And I'm specifically thinking about internet connectivity and what kind of funding was used to generate this program. Thanks.
Did you want the students to answer these questions as we go? The first question was asked and I think we moved on. I just wanted to make sure we're not familiar with the protocol. So I don't want anybody to jump in if we're doing that out of step.
Well, I mean, you guys are kind of like our first team presenters. So however you guys want to work it, if you want to speak to it and then the students want to come in, or the students want to answer it and you come in. And
Jeff, if I can, I'll answer really quickly part of that funding question, because I don't think I can speak to the internet connectivity issue. And obviously we know statewide that's been a real concern for lots of districts. We've been fortunate enough that our Board of Ed and our superintendent have set Utica students up to be successful and had the resources to do that and leveraged that ability, which is wonderful and incredibly commendable. As far as this actual program from the student perspective, I can tell you that it cost a few $100s to go to the Student Mental Health Summit, which was, as Sophia put, what lit the flame and the interest in them. And that was something that I funded out of the building. But beyond that, we've done everything. It's free to create a social media account. It's free to get online and research. Well, I mean, using school resources or your phone to find those resources and put them out there. And that's been really important, as we wanted this to be very accessible to all of the kids. But I'll let the students talk about what they think might be some pitfalls early on and some things that they wish they would have known now. I mean, we're still early on now, 5 months into this rather than where they were 1 month. So Sophia or Allie, if you guys want to answer that question, please do. Mr. Talberg would love the answer, I think.
So just talking about the funding, going back to the funding question, I would just say that, to be honest, the biggest thing is just time, having the time commitment and having the passion in it to want to research for so long to find the best thing that's going to answer people's questions, going to inform them correctly about things that they are actually facing, not just something that seems popular at the time. But as far as the bumps in the road, I really think that the most important thing, because I would say the best part for us was that as soon as we had an idea, we put it into action. And so for us, it wasn't hard to get things going because the people who are in the group, the core members of the group, were just ready to keep going and keep building and help people. But as far as with the community goes, I think something that I did touch on was that we want to make sure that people know we're not trying to be psychologists. We're not trying to be professionals, because we're not. We're students and we're not ready to tackle serious health conditions that people in our community are unfortunately facing. We're just trying to be a helping hand to help people see the bright side and have an optimistic outlook about coming to school or about being online, or like the world has hit us with pretty harsh things lately. So it's just to open our eyes to see the good.
And going off of what Sophia said, we're basically just here to give more of a student perspective, especially considering like we're going through a pandemic and we're in high school. So that's having a huge impact on us. So that we just wanted to make sure that like we know, oh my gosh, that other kids and like other high schoolers know that there is other methods that aren't like actually professional methods, and hence the word student in Student Mental Health Committee.
Jeff, if I might just say a couple things from a district perspective. First and foremost, if a district is pointed in the right direction of school personnel and they are invested in this, they can overcome any hurdle. Let me just say that first and foremost. We have fantastic counselors. We have a fantastic Board of Education. We have great kids. We have a central office team that supports this initiative, Mrs. Charlin, that's on the line, that really has been instrumental in putting this together. But you asked a question. The corporate sponsorship right now with hotspots in the community and being able to get student access, I have found to be at the highest level right now during this pandemic. So I would just encourage my peers to really look at some of those opportunities. But I think the biggest thing is this. When you talk about peer interaction, I mean, when I heard Allie and Sophia talk today, I hope all of us can see that the future is bright. We have great leaders that are coming down the pike. I feel that we are going to be in great hands someday for these two that are making decisions for the multitudes of students at Utica High, but how impressionable they have been to our other 3 high schools and our junior highs. I mean, it has been infectious in Utica Community Schools, the work that they have done. And I just want to really applaud their efforts. And it really delights me to see the work that they have done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Monroe. I guess what I wanted to do, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here. That's not what I'm trying to, but you just mentioned a lot of different resources that other school districts don't necessarily have. And so what I'm trying to do is tie this back to this funding issue, which we're going to hear about later on today. In the state of Michigan, there's not a very fair funding model for our schools. And this is a wonderful program. And I think, Ben, you hit it on the head. Even if a district can implement just a few of these things, they'll be amazing. So you guys are definitely a beacon of light and have so much for schools to just, even if they can just implement, grab a couple of these kinds of things. But other districts, we have people from all over the state here. Ruth, for example, is all the way up in Houghton Hancock. Districts up there are very different. You know, we have people here from Dearborn and Detroit and all over the state. They're all so different, and the funding model doesn't work necessarily to have those kinds of resources available to everybody. On the subcommittee that we're on, we're talking about social workers and counselors. We know that there's a staff shortage across the country, not just in the state of Michigan. So that would be another hurdle. And again, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but these programs and your guys' program is such a beacon because those resources are there. What we want as a council is we want to address and fix those issues. So you guys are a wonderful example that we can use going forward to say, see, this is what we can do. This is exactly what we can do for all of our students. What is it, 1.5 million students here in the state of Michigan, when we're given a fair opportunity and a fair chance to address these kinds of things with our students. So thank you very much. So I'll stop talking.
Okay, I think I have a question from Stephen Meyer.
Good morning. You know, Mr. Monroe, I didn't know what to expect this morning being a newly elected board member in just my second week. And thank you for inviting me to this and allowing me to participate. Because on a Friday morning, to be able to see two, and I'm not even going to use the word young, I'm just going to say leaders. You two are leaders. You are leaders in your community. You are leaders in the peer group. And to have this audience in front of you, you have your superintendent, you have members of your Board of Education, you have your principal, and you have leaders from around the state in the area that are listening to what you're saying, and they're hearing you. You are leaders, and I wanted you to hear that. I couldn't think of a better way to start a Friday morning, to be honest with you, than to see this. So this has been very impressive, and I'm so thankful to be a part of this. My question is, as leaders in your peer group, being the closest to the student voice, like I was saying, you have your superintendent and members of the board and leaders from around the area. Is there something that you would want us to hear, not necessarily about your program, which is incredible, but is there something that you would want us to hear when we're talking about these issues of social, emotional, health and from a student's perspective, are there things that we need to know, that you think that we need to know, that you're hearing? Is it anxiety about exams? Is it, what is it that you think we need to know the most as we move forward with the rest of this school year? And so that was my question. And again, thank you so much to the both of you for having the courage to step out and lead like this. This is an incredible thing.
So I think the next comment was from Lisa.
Do Allie or Sophia want to answer that? I saw Allie look like she was getting ready to.
I thought Sophia was going to say something too.
Yeah, okay, so let's give them a second. If you don't mind, Mandy, can I give them a second first? Okay.
Allie, you can start this one if you'd like.
Okay. So basically, one thing that I would want, the board to pretty much hear from the student perspective is that yes, there is a lot of stress around the standardized testing and the exams, but we found ways to handle it, but sometimes it's still too much for us.
As a student, not just talking about academic endeavors, but I would say just being in school in general, I think that as a student, I would like teachers and people around me to know that sometimes it's difficult to not put up a wall when you come into the building and you're around people that are your same age, but might not have the same direction in life as you, or have the same outlook, or have the same home life. It's difficult to want to be vulnerable. And I think that when we are vulnerable and when we are most ourselves, that's when our mental health is the best. And so I think that is easiest to do when we have the support and encouragement of the staff of our school, of the students of our school, and just making sure that everyone feels like you're a team in this and you're not an individual trying to make it through a very tough time. Like Ali said, like the standardized testing is difficult, and it means it's a big marker in your life that stands for a lot in our society. So yeah, I think knowing that you're encouraged and supported and getting the resources, like Mr. Whittle said, getting the resources so that you can succeed is also extremely important. But yes, the anxiety does get pretty intense sometimes. And I think that it has to do with the big moments, but it's also the in-betweens, like when the homework piles up, but there's also so many other things that you would like to be like trying to do with this time, experiencing so many things, so that in these formative years that we can figure out what we like and what passions we want to later pursue. So.
Thank you to both of you. And Sophia and Ali, you both took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you for being so vulnerable today, both with us and within your peer communities and in the larger community, and being a part of your larger community. I live and work in the Macomb area. If there are anything that either of you need to continue the work, or anybody on your team to continue the work, I know that we have resources in the community as a larger piece, since you're just doing such beautiful work there. So I know your staff and colleagues at your schools will reach out to us if needed. I also wanted to just address something Mr. Monroe said, and welcome Mr. Meyer to Utica. I spent years in Utica, and being a former team member there, I want to say this: I commend this district because they always take a team approach. And I think that's very apparent today from the students being here as building administrator, central office administrator, the superintendent, and the board members taking time out of their day. And I agree that there really is no problem that this district ever faces that they don't sit down and approach as a team. And they look at it as a positive challenge. And I know they would lend their expertise to other places in the state that are feeling that challenge too. So hopefully, Jeff, that makes you feel comfortable too. I think this is a really wonderful resource to be considered, using statewide at this point. So I commend all of you, and thank you, ladies, for your time today and your perseverance and being vulnerable.
I believe Mary Thomas is next.
Yep. Hi, thank you. Just to echo everybody, thank you guys for being here today. Thank you for the amazing presentation. Thank you, Kelly. As you know, our point person counseling, I'm a counselor during my day job. So this really spoke to me. I truly appreciate it. Just sharing everything you're doing for our kids, because I do think peers learn from peers, especially when it comes to mental health issues. They're going to listen to you. I'm the mom, so I'm not going to be listened to. So thank you. Jeff, one of the things I want, you make a really good point about, we're in a very resource rich area. And I think we recognize that and recognize some of our peers, especially up north or in some of the more rural counties, will have some challenges connecting with this. And one of the things I would encourage folks to do and take back is, reach out to your universities in your area, even in your region. There's a lot of counselor education, psychology programs, social work programs that their grad students are looking for push-ins to support programs like this. So if you don't have the immediate resources within your county or within your district, think bigger and think where you can tap, especially in this virtual environment. My day job, we constantly are getting requests for that, and it's fantastic and it serves our community. So, think bigger and think about those resources the other districts can use to support an initiative like this. So thanks, and good to see you, Jeff.
Well, my question I was going to ask Mary, you kind of just answered it. So I'm a school counselor in Hastings, and it seems like the big springboard for this was the summit that the students and members attended. And I was wondering what you would recommend for a school district as a springboard. It would be nice to have a conference like that where everyone could be trained and seek out different sessions to learn from. But in absence of that, do you have a method? I mean, I really liked Mary's idea of contacting like a local university to see about some professionals helping, but do you have any other suggestions on how to get this started?
I could certainly say that any district would be welcome to go to our UHS wellness page or UCS wellness page, which is on our district website. There are a ton of resources that Ms. Charland has put together there. It's open. The documents are all sorted or cited, so you can see where the originals came from and make it your own. That conference that we referred to was actually, it is a virtual conference now because of all the challenges with the pandemic and challenges getting people there. I don't know if that'll remain virtual next year, but I know they're looking at hybrid opportunities because of that. But even the stuff there, a lot of the resources on there, like Work to Be Well, is a free website that is available for anybody to use. The You Matter organization it's a national organization that all of the resources are online. So as we started out, and I think as Sophia said greatly, no one's alone. These resources are all out there. Star Commonwealth was another one that was an organization that we use. So none of this was any original design. It was all stuff that was freely accessible on the web. And I think things that any district, could go to. And like Sophia said, start small and work out. These kids started with one idea to do a toolbox, and that toolkit expanded to the 12 days. The 12 days expanded to the You Matter week. And as one of your other board members said, I think we expect it to get bigger and better as these kids dig in and find more and more resources out there. But again, none of it was cost intensive upfront, aside from the obvious connectivity issues, which Jeff's totally spot on. But I think it's very easy to begin small and then work out from those smaller ripples.
Kathy, I would just mention as well, as we're sharing here, our intermediate school districts are also a wealth of information. Just as Dr. Rivard is on the line here, she's learning and hearing everything that can be brought back to the intermediate school district and be able to share with colleagues, other school districts, a lot of pair sharing that takes place amongst them. Jeff, I also wanted to just make mention to you as well. I think you're spot on when we talk about funding and support for social and emotional learning in our school districts. And I don't want anybody to think for a minute that Utica Community Schools is rich with all sorts of fantastic resources because of our size being the second biggest. I mean, this is still, you heard it, we're producing much of this on zero budget. This is about people power in addition to other responsibilities, coordinating with kids and making all of these things happen. So I applaud your effort to say that this needs to be an initiative, this needs to be funded. Social work support. We have no counselors at our elementary schools. We have no social work support for non-special education students in our elementary schools or junior highs. I mean, to really make this a systemic, supportive initiative, you're spot on. And I applaud your effort to collaborate that back with us, because I don't want anybody to think that this is a funded movement and we're doing this with all sorts of fiduciary responsibility. So thank you for that.
I appreciate you saying that. I just wanted to mention quickly in that subgroup that we've been talking about not only the student to counselor ratio and the lack of counseling or support staff like you're mentioning, but the importance of the role being used properly within the building. And I think this is a perfect example of school counselors being used as they are trained and having the ability to use that training to benefit all. So I really applaud you for that. And I just think it's a really excellent model that it would be great to look at to replicating.
If I could jump in here, I would totally agree with that. In one of our meetings, actually, the students started talking about how we feel that sometimes our counselors were only there for scheduling problems or to figure out what colleges we wanted to go to. But then that's where we came up with the idea. Well, we utilized the idea that we've seen at the summit and at some online resources about minute meetings or meetings with your counselor or videos with meet the counselor so that you can understand them a little bit better. And so, yeah, I think that's really important to know that they're there to confide in. They're not just there to bounce things off of.
Okay, I think we have a comment from Gigi, and just want to be mindful about our schedule. So just putting that caution on.
Quickly stated then, good morning. And most importantly, congratulations and thank you so much, Sophia and Allie. An inspiring presentation, professionally done. You've given us some great ideas to take back to our own districts. Noted the URL that has been put in the chat, wanted to check whether it would also be possible for us to access from today's meeting the slide presentation, the recording of the slide presentation that you gave, or does the district otherwise already have a recording of a similar presentation? And one final comment, Sophia and Allie, you modestly said that you were not professionals, but we see you as incredibly capable and you're already adults. As Mr. Meyer pointed out, you are leaders, you have great courage, and thank you again.
All right, if there aren't any more comments, we could say thank you so much to our guests here. We usually do a debrief after you guys have left the call so we can talk about how to put this information into our future work. But I just want to say for the group, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I literally just cut and pasted your virtual calming room into an email so I can send it to all the admin because I think it's such great work, and just thank you for coming.
Mandy, can I just say, Tom just put in the chat that he's going to send the presentation to Lisa and myself, and we can send it out to you guys via email.
That would be great. All right, thank you so much for being our guests today. We really appreciate it. Good job, everybody. So once our guests have left the call, we can start doing our Q&A debrief, and they can join us with our live streaming if they would like to keep watching our discussion. All right, so debrief. Anyone have a comment or a question of how we want to connect that to some of our work here?
I'm going to go ahead to my virtual calming room. And
I also will note that I do think we forgot to put in a break. Our next guest is on, as far as the agenda is concerned, at 10:30. So we have roughly about a half hour right now. So just to keep, the schedule of our debrief and then trying to work in at least a 5 to 10 minute break in case anyone needs it. So anyone comment or question? Ben, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just think, we all are aware that mental health has taken on a kind of more of a spotlight, which is, I think, one of the silver linings to everything that we've gone through with the pandemic and with demonstrations. I feel like we're in a place, especially with GEAC here, to really take this and move it in a significant way. I just see another committee forming around mental health, and I just want to, I just want to encourage that direction.
Still waiting for anyone in the chat for a comment or question. I have Jeff and then Gigi.
Kathy, I wanted to thank you very much for bringing up the counselor and social work, some of the conversations and the work that we've been doing in our subcommittee. It's so important that I think that this kind of, I think the general public doesn't realize it for sure, but I don't think in schools they realize until you mentioned it the other day in our meeting about how the roles of a counselor and a social worker are kind of grayed and they're doing things that are outside of their training. I did not know that. I didn't realize. I mean, I know that they're all overworked and but I didn't realize to that extent. So I just wanted to thank you very much for bringing that up. And two, I guess I wanted to apologize a little bit when I asked my question about funding and all that. I sure hope it wasn't taken as me being a downer, a Debbie Downer, because that wasn't my intention. I know all the work that we do here. We always talk about funding in all of these different areas. Like when I brought up Ruth and in Dearborn and Detroit, these are all such vast, and I didn't want to make it sound like Utica was rich with everything. I mean, that's not at all what I was trying to get across. What I was trying to say is, and I hope I did this, is that these are the amazing things that we can achieve when education is properly funded and we're allowed to talk freely and openly and honestly about not just this issue, but a great deal of issues, and that it honestly gets talked about and looked at and funded properly. And, our schools, our communities, and our students all win when these things are honestly and openly looked at. And that's really what I was trying to say. So I hope it didn't come off as a gray cloud on this beautiful presentation. So anyways.
All right, Gigi?
Having access to the slide deck would be very valuable, but I think the key is their voices and the fact that it was their presentation. And I'll be honest, I don't know that I could push this out in my district without those amazing young ladies. So yeah, we've had other very powerful presentations from Zenob's student, from Ruth's student, and did we actually get those, recorded, and what are the permission rights to make those available? Well, particularly for today's presentation.
Sorry, I'm having some difficulties with my mouse. Okay, so I wanted to say, I mean, that was obviously amazing. But I also want to kind of point to the fact that we have to be cognizant of the fact that the solutions are not all in schools, right? So like one thing the pandemic kind of showed us is that schools are the Band-Aid for the bullet wound in society. And we need to, I guess, encourage community partnerships. So I want to say, I guess, not to be a Debbie Downer either, I think student voices are the way to go. I think it's increasingly clear that they are more eloquent, more powerful, and more authentic, and they understand social emotional learning in a way that we never will. That's first. And then second, I think when we are kind of sharing these resources, I know that I'm going to be encouraging partnerships in my community, not just like the solution cannot be all on the students. It cannot be all on the school. That's actually adding to the anxiety that everybody in this Zoom room feels. So hopefully, every community approaches this differently, and every community has different priorities and values and everything. So I just kind of wanted to point that out so that we don't feel like, it's all on us. It's a reminder that it's not.
Okay, Ruth?
Yeah, so just actually going right off of what Zainab said is I was thinking kind of the same thing, is that how much are we as educators expected to do for free? Like, how much more of this can we do? Like, I am so inspired by these young ladies, and like the word proud came up, and normally, you know, you would think like, okay, I'm proud of my students, I'm proud of my children, you know, but and they're not my children, but they represent all of our students, I think. And so to see that, I don't remember who it was that said this, I think it was the superintendent maybe, but like, it's just that we do have this next generation of students that are coming up. I feel we can be very proud of them, and that we are doing good work to make sure that they are going to be leaders in our society, that they're going to understand their place in their community, and that they have a strong civic background to effect change if they see the need for it. And so that's the pride, you know, that's the pride for, like, you know, what we're all doing as a group. But yeah, I mean, like, it's not all just us. And so talking about funding is one thing. So like, you know, if money's attached to it, then there might be other resources that are available, that it's not just like, well, can't you just, you know, do this, you know, in your free time? Can't you just, you know, set up this whole wellness program? And yeah, no, I mean, can't we get parents involved sometimes too? You know, there are certainly parents and community members who would like to be more involved in the education of our children. And we found that so much with the pandemic that you know, they become a lot more those who are very interested in their children's education and making sure that they are getting a proper education have been like so thankful. Oh, thank you, teachers. Now we realize how hard you work. And what we're doing in our subcommittee is actually trying to make sure that we're getting that message out to community members as well as parents. Like, this is what is happening in our schools. This is what public education is. And yeah, is it a Band-Aid? Is it something that society has both condemned but also has relied on for solving all of the problems with children and education? Yeah. And I think yeah, I don't, you know, so I guess there's no solution, but I did want to say that I do think that this is, especially when we're talking about wellness, that this is like a community issue. It takes a village, you know, whatever. But I mean, it really does. It doesn't take, you know, some dedicated teachers only. Of course, we're always willing to help those students, and you know that most of us are therapists for our students daily. You know, you see the problems, you see the look in their eyes, and hey, how's it going? Good morning, blah, blah, blah. How are you doing? And when they linger around, you know, there's a reason. And so we're there, but, and we make time for that. But as far as these programs are concerned, yeah, I don't know. So is this something that, that we can do? Because I guess we have the ability to recommend that there are programs that are formed that are that are properly funded by state government, to say like, yeah, this should be a Michigan-wide thing. This should be something that should be available to all schools, and it's not necessarily in the hand of the educators or the individual districts. Because yeah, like, okay, USC has obviously all of these resources and people, but yeah, anyway, that's it. Sorry, I talked a long time.
Okay, so I think we are on Lisa, Kathy, and then Owen.
So I'm going to put some resources in the chat. I do some work nationally for an organization called the Institute for Humane Education, and we have work around what's called having students be solutionaries, and they come up with solutions to community-based and worldwide problems, which we can see this common pattern in our world right now, that students have so much to say about it, But I think what Zainab and Ruth has just kind of lifted here is that we have to think about school as a greater place than the four walls of the building that kind of narrow that vision. And so I'm going to put some resources in there, but I think that as we move forward, this is a really, this whole, shedding the light on the pandemic has made us realize that our learning spaces cannot be contrived to these walls, that they have to broaden. There's got to be some change. And so today I will just try to start that conversation a little bit and lift some resources that you can look at, and maybe we can chat either outside of the group or inside of the group at a later date. So just thinking a little bit larger. And thank you for Zainab and Ruth for bringing that up and lifting that. It's a good opportunity for us to consider change.
Okay, next is Kathy.
I'll be very brief. I just wanted to say it's nice to have such a positive start to Friday, but even in relation with Jeff's subcommittee, when we're talking about, we've had conversations about what counselors and social workers cannot do if they're not used properly. It's nice to look at the opposite and look at all they can do when they're used properly. So it's just nice to kind of have that positive part within that topic as well. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, Owen.
I will also be brief, but I just wanted to point out that a lot of the resources that we were shown and given today from that group would not work without the student input and without being student-led. I think that there's an instinct from those of us who are super well-meaning in our various educator roles, and we want to take these great resources and just like, here, have these to all the people that they could be applicable to in our own lives and districts. But something like, I loved that Monday newsletter that they had. But if that was just a counselor putting that out to the district every week, it would get largely ignored by the student body as just like another thing that counselor is doing. But when it's a student who is leading it and initiating it, and they know that it's their fellow students' voices being heard in it, then you get buy-in from the rest of the students. So I just wanted to make sure that the work they're doing doesn't get divorced from the importance of the students leading that work.
Let's see, we have a very brief comment from Jeff. Just want to give a reminder, it's 10:13 if we want to take a break before the 10:30, just.
Yeah, yep, I'm very cognizant of that. I just wanted to ask when Margaret was speaking, so I'm just curious, is when I was trying to find some of the GEAC videos on YouTube. I guess what I want to ask, is there any way that the department can have, because you can have different playlists on YouTube, can they create a playlist just for the GEAC videos? When you search, they're very sporadic and I can't go back and find, because I wanted to send one of the videos that had one of the student groups because they wanted to have something to compare it to. I actually couldn't find any of the YouTube videos from that. I know that when Zainab's students presented, there was an issue and we couldn't record that. But I know the other ones they were able to record. I'm just curious if they have them archived somewhere, if they could make a channel or a playlist that's labeled GEAC so that we can use that as a resource, until we stop using Zoom. So that was,
yeah.
I just asked that.
We can definitely do that. That's no problem. And I can send everybody the link to that. But we did have Zainab come back, and we recorded her and closed captioned it and posted it. And we pushed that out through our newsletter and social media. So if you are not all subscribed to our newsletter and social media, which sounds like that you are not based on the conversation I'm hearing today, please do that, because we actually added, there should be 400,000 people on our distribution list for the newsletter, and you had to unsubscribe to not get it. So most of you should get it, but we'll make sure those are categorized, Jeff, accordingly, and then we'll share that back out to you so you can access them.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
They are also all available on the GEAC webpage, on the Michigan.gov page, and I just put the direct link in the chat.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, do I have to, Leah, correct me, do I have to make a motion for us to go on break?
Yes, we have been doing it that way.
Greg has one comment, I think, that got missed.
Oh,
My comment was just to move for a 10-minute break.
I'll second that.
Okay, so Greg made the motion, Ruth seconded, and we will be back a little before 10:30.
Hello, Randy. How are you?
Doing great.
Good. Thanks again for being with us this morning.
You bet. I'm ready to roll.
Yeah, we'll get started right at 10:30, and we're jumping right into your presentation. So.
All right. Sounds good. And Jeff, I have if I can, I've got done a shared screen slideshow that I'll use for my presentation of PowerPoint.
Okay, I'll ask Leah to make you a host, and then you can share that out.
Okay.
I think she just heard me, so.
I did. Hi, Randy. Yeah, you should
Hi.
be able to share screen, no problem.
Yeah. Yep. I'll just click the share screen on and pop it on there. Sounds good.
Mandy, I just
Yes.
wanted
What?
to tell you, I just wanted to tell you you're doing a fabulous job.
Thanks.
I just wanted to tell you that.
Thanks. That makes me feel good because it feels nervous.
You're knocking it out of the park.
Hey, Greg, I think you run a smoother ship and it's very peaceful to not have to run.
Nobody can replace Greg, but you're doing an awesome job.
It's definitely more peaceful not to run it. I'll tell you that much.
All of a sudden I get my A's and nays mixed up. Okay, is anyone looking at Ben's away picture right now? Because that is awesome.
Well, if it were a Michigan sweatshirt, I think it would be a little better, but that's okay.
Nah. Hey, I do have one question. So I noticed that in our Google stuff, Leah, I don't have any, I can't find my GEAC folder in my Google Drive used to have all the GEAC stuff, and now it has just the 2020. So did that all get moved to the MDE?
Yep.
And
So over
then-
the last 3 months, we have been warning all of you that we're going to move only to the SharePoint folders.
Right, and now I don't know how to find it in MDEs. What do I look at?
What are you looking for specifically? I can either send you the link. I mean, I'm happy to provide training separate from our full meeting.
I'm just looking for my folders and stuff like that. I still was able to find them, but just not in my normal GEAC drive. And I'm on the MDE email. On the site, I just wasn't sure. Is it somewhere in there?
Yeah, I'll send you a link, and then you should be able to bookmark it. That'd probably be the easiest.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I had the same issues this morning. Last time I had no problem getting to it, and for some reason today I couldn't get to it at all.
I second that.
I guess I need help understanding get to what specifically and how you're trying and what isn't working. So,
well, for example, I wanted to pull up the stuff for our policy committee. And when I looked at my GEAC folder and I looked at my subcommittee that I created, there were no files in there. And I thought, oh, that's right, Leah moved them to MDE. So when I went to MDE, I couldn't find it. I was still able to find stuff in my drive, but I don't know how to find it in the MDE. But if you're going to send me that link, I'm all over it.
Okay.
See, Ben, this is an issue with engineers. Engineers like to play with our emotions. So they put the same ID on different platforms, but instead of they put it backwards just to confuse us.
Yeah, that's going to confuse me. That's why engineering, not me, for sure.
Like Apple likes to put their on buttons in back of the computer instead of in front.
I'm just wondering, and I know we got to move on here and get to Randy and his presentation, but I'm just wondering if maybe there's time, like maybe Leah, you could just share your screen and we could go there and you could just kind of, I don't know, give a quick overview of where things are and that. Maybe that would be easier, a quick 10-minute, just here it is, this is where it's at kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide training for anybody who needs it. I'd recommend probably doing that outside the public meeting. And so we could schedule that for a separate time. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you and sorry.
All right, it looks like almost everybody's back. And we have another guest. And Jeff, would you like to introduce?
Thank you very much, Mandy. Yes, I'd like to introduce Dr. Randy Lipa. He is the current superintendent for Wayne Risa, the intermediate school district in Wayne County, and has been for the past 6 years. Prior to that, he was superintendent for the Livonia Public Schools for 12 years. He's been engaged in school policy discussions for many years and has been involved with the School Finance Research Collaborative effort to review Michigan's school funding system. Thank you very much, Randy, for being with us today or this morning. And the floor and the screen is yours.
All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and share a screen here, and we'll get rolling. And it is great to be here with you today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about school funding here in Michigan and the research collaborative and the work that they've done to try to promote a fair funding system here in Michigan. And so what I hope I can do today is with the presentation, provide at least a level of understanding about some key concepts around, number one, how we currently fund schools in Michigan. Number two, how that's been impacting our students over the last several years. And then last, really come back to what the research says about how we may want to change that funding and what we can do to better help our students be successful and to better help all of our children. And so those are the three things that we'll try to do today with the presentation. In doing so, I'm going to highlight a very well-researched study that we completed a few years back that came about not just from educators, but really from stakeholders across the state of Michigan in a variety of different fields and occupations. And the common concept from this group was really, they really wanted to look at our funding system and talk about if there's a better way to do that here in the state of Michigan, to really get the research behind that would tell us what direction we ought to be moving in as we're thinking about improving achievement for our kids. And so, so I'll start really with, and maybe for some of you this will be review, but I do want to create that foundation of background in regards to where we're at right now with the way that schools are funded. And so, you know, some basics, you may recall back in 1994, which is, my gosh, 27 years ago now, at that point in time, that was the last time we really made a significant change to the way that schools are funded in the state of Michigan. And there are a couple of things that they really were trying to do at that point in time. There was an over-reliance on property taxes in regards to funding school systems. And so you had not only this large property tax burden on residents, but at the same point in time, you had this significant variance between communities because some communities could raise a whole lot more money with their tax base than could other communities. And so there was this divergent level of resources for school districts based on that being the way that we funded schools. And so 1994, significant event occurred, voted on by the voters in the state of Michigan to change the way that we fund schools and really change it to be, number one, more focused on a state formula as opposed to local, purely local focus. And also then trying to reduce the reliance on property tax and also start to close that gap between school districts. And so as you look at that, this graph just shows you, just briefly, prior to Proposal A, orange is local, blue is state. And then after Proposal A, blue is state, orange is local again. And so you can see just by the graph how things really shifted, and we went from a locally controlled funding system in the state of Michigan to a more state-controlled funding system. And so with that, you know, came some good things, but also came some challenges over the last 27 years. This graph just shows you here where the disparity was between school districts back in 94, 95, where you can see the highest funded districts were at $6,500 from the state, or in some districts even higher than that. And the lowest funded districts were about $4,200. So you had a $2,300 variance. And so you can see as of 2016-17, this is a little bit dated information, it's even a little bit closer now, but you can see that that's been reduced down to $600. And again, that disparity is even a little bit less now. So two of their goals, very frankly, to reduce the disparity between districts and the overall amount of money that they receive per student. They did achieve that, and they also did reduce the property tax burden on local property tax payers. And so those two things were accomplished to some extent by Proposal A, but with that system that they put in place with the state controlling the allocations on an annual basis, there are a variety of things that we would argue have become dated and really detrimental in regards to how schools are funded in the state of Michigan. And so I would just highlight as we look at the next component of this that, you know, what's really happened, even though those goals have been addressed, what's really happened in regards to the funding system here in Michigan to really keep up with the needs of our students. And so that's something that I think intrinsically those in the education field know that we've been starting to fall behind for some time now. And, you know, why is that? And so even though those issues were addressed, when you look at the funding formulas that have been put in place, the amount of investment on an annual basis that the state's made, because the state controls the funding now, into the system has really lagged what's occurred across the country. And so Michigan State actually did a study, I think 1 or 2 years ago, and came out with their findings that out of 50 states, the state of Michigan actually in new investment over the last 25 years ranks 50th. We're at the bottom in regards to the new investment that the state has made into that funding system compared to our colleagues. And so that's been a challenge for local school districts. The way that we fund schools now is based on, the foundation allowance, as I talked about, the amount of money per student, and it of course depends on how many students that you have. And so enrollment decline, which has occurred to some extent across the state of Michigan, and the fact that from a policy standpoint, we've actually changed and we've actually increased the number of schools. And I'm not saying that's a plus or a minus against charter schools. I'm just saying the way that we fund schools in Michigan, when you have more schools and more entities that are getting that funded, it starts to get spread out. And so that's been a challenge for local school districts as they've been budgeting every year, along with the fact that the investment has not kept up with some of our states across the country. In addition to that, there's been a significant pressure for local school districts based on retirement costs and the retirement system over that period of time. Special education funding has put additional pressure on local school districts. And in fact, we're probably about $800 million short of funding what the required special education costs are here in the state of Michigan. And we know that on that allocation that's made every year from the state, when they do their state budget for schools every year, we know that in recent years, as they've dealt with their own budget struggles, they've included into the school aid budget higher education and community colleges, which has taken a portion of the funding that could have gone to the K-12 system in the school aid fund. So that's put some additional pressure on the system. And so when you look at those things combined, what's happened over a period of time is a gradual reduction in program services and, very frankly, related to that student performance over time. And I would just give an example of what that looks like in a local school district, because I lived this as a local superintendent from 2003 until 2015 in Livonia. And so just to give you an example, in our school district, if you're looking at our budget from year to year, and even if the state was providing some additional funds into the foundation allowance, in our case, I'll just take any particular year, if we received a 1% or 1.5% increase from the state in our funding on our foundation allowance, that'd be about $100 per student, a little bit more. We had just ballpark 16,000 students. And so that's $1.6 million in additional money for the next budget year. But we were also in the process of declining enrollment. And so we were losing approximately 300 students per year, which is a small percentage on 16,000. But we were losing 300 students. You multiply that by our foundation allowance, we were losing over $2 million in our revenue. If you throw in the fact that in many of those years, the retirement costs were going up. And so out of any money that we had coming in, we would have to pay, for an example, on average about $1 million more into the retirement system every year. You're looking at retirement system and enrollment challenges to our budget that were over $3 million, and yet we were only getting about $1.6 million in new money. And so every year we were sitting down with our Board of Education and saying, okay, we're going to have to reduce our budget. And one of these, and I would just describe this enrollment challenge. When you think about 300 students, we had 25 schools in Livonia at the time. That's about 10 students per school. And so when you think about Stevenson High School with 2,000 students, if we have 1,990 students the next year, what can we actually reduce in costs, that would, recognize the fact that we're going to be a couple of $1 million short in our school district. And so our ability to reduce our costs didn't measure up with the loss of revenue that we were dealing with. And so that meant higher class sizes, fewer support services, less supplies, et cetera. We were making those decisions every year. And that's what I talk about when I say that was really the result. Our story was not wildly different in regards to what was going on in school districts across the state of Michigan. And so again, 1994, state takes over the process in funding schools. They start to close the enrollment gap or the foundation allowance funding gap. But at the same point in time, these pressures that I've just outlined really put a significant challenge onto local school districts in regards to the programs and services that they were providing to their to their communities. And so what happened, again, I'll just highlight some of the headlines in the papers that were occurring when this study started to begin. And that was, Michigan test scores gains are worse than the nation. Michigan is the 32nd best public school system. A report says state must take action now on schools to make up lost ground. These were the cumulative things that we were seeing in our educational system across the state of Michigan because of, in one way of looking at this, the antiquated school funding system that really we were trying to work with. And so again, what's at stake here? What did we decide to do? And so, there were stakeholders across the Michigan that came together and said, look, to improve student performance, we have to change how the schools look at how we're funding our schools to meet the needs of all of our students. And so this report that we ultimately came up with started to provide the building blocks to go ahead and do that. And again, just a couple more examples of how we were starting to fall behind compared to some of our other states. In 2000, we ranked 8th in the country in regards to our per pupil spending. That number has significantly come down. You can see on an inflation adjusted basis, our spending on a per student basis has gone down over almost $700 per student, while other states have actually increased their funding on a inflation adjusted basis by well over $1,000 per student. And so you can see, and again, that highlight from the Michigan State study that we're 50 out of 50 in regards to the investment in our educational system over the past 25 years, really sets the stage for us, needing to take a look at the way that we fund schools in Michigan. And so what came from that is this School Finance Research Collaborative that was created. And so what is this collaborative? It's basically a group. It was a 22-member statewide group of diverse and very bipartisan group of leaders. And so it included people from not just the education community, but from the philanthropic community, from our business community. We had former Republican and Democratic legislators that came together with us. Some of them were there in 1994 when Proposal A passed. And basically this group of stakeholders across the state basically did have one thing in common, even with their wide variety of backgrounds, and that was they felt that it was time to change how schools are funded in the state of Michigan. This just gives you a little picture here of the 22-member original group that came together, and it shows you what kind of backgrounds they had and where they came from. And so you can see it was a diverse group of people that came together, and they came together from across the state of Michigan. And these are just some names. You guys may recognize some of the names of the original group that came together to be part of this School Research Collaborative. And so I'll just, give you a chance to sort of peek at that in regards to the people that have been we're a part of the original group to participate in that. And so if I can continue to go on, what was the goal of the Finance Research Collaborative as we get going? And it really was, when we asked ourselves, what do we want to accomplish? At the end of the day, we really came to this idea that we wanted to ask the question, what does it really cost to educate every one of our students here in the state of Michigan to meet the benchmarks that have been set by the state in regards to the student achievement for students? And so we have benchmarks at every grade level in regards to what we want our students to know. And so in order to get all of our students to that level, what would school need to look like? How would that be laid out in order to, and what would that cost be in order to meet that goal? That was ultimately the question that we asked, that we wanted research to go ahead and answer for us. And so again, you can see here, this is just an example of a commission separate from ours who came out and said to achieve the learning outcomes we want and need, Michigan must invest in an efficient and effective system of public funding that ensures that every student is supported by sufficient resources to achieve high performance standards. This came from the, at that point in time, Governor Snyder 21st Century Education Commission report. And this has been supported by a variety of studies that have occurred since then. Midwest Trust has just recently put out several reports. Again, the Michigan State University study. Upjohn did a study, I think it was in 2018. A variety of studies of our school funding system here, and they've come to the same conclusion that this really needs to be addressed. And so the way that we decided we wanted to tackle this was to, to answer that question that we laid out. And from the research of the group that we put together, they identified that there have been a variety of adequacy studies, as we call them, that have been performed across the country as it relates to trying to answer that question: what is the cost to educate a child in their state in order to meet the objectives that have been outlined? And so, just highlighted here, there have been over 30 states, and this is when we started the study, that have conducted adequacy studies over the past 15 years. So we aren't the creators of this kind of concept and idea. This has been studied and implemented for some time. And so what is an adequacy study? What are the components of that? There are 4 different ways or 4 approaches that were identified in regards to how you would go about doing this. The successful school district approach is actually an approach where you look at school districts that have been successful, and you identify what those, you identify how much money they're spending as sort of a good baseline to say you ought to be spending at least this much, because we're seeing some of our successful school districts being successful in that regard. And so the state of Michigan actually commissioned a study back in 2016, and they used that approach to identify, potentially what we should be investing in the state of Michigan. That study showed that we're at least $1,000 behind where we should be on a per student basis for funding schools. But really, it didn't really dig in deeply in regards to saying, well, what would that really pay for? What would you do with those resources? And so we thought that was a good start and a component that was helpful research. But as we looked at these 4 different methods, we really focused on the professional judgment approach and the evidence-based approach in regards to really doing an in-depth study in regards to what we would want the, what kind of answers we would want to help support us build a better system. And so I'll just spend a little bit of time on the approaches that we used. And it really makes a lot of sense, because you think about a funding study and it's all about the numbers, right? It's all about dollars and cents and so on. But that's not really how these studies work. These studies basically talk about, again, what is your intended outcome? And really it asks the question, what does school need to look like in order to meet the objectives that you're outlining? And so by these established and true, tried methods, research methods, they, one, look at what they call the professional judgment approach, which is getting educators who are living the work every day together to say, okay, what does school need to look like if we're going to have every one of the students in your school be successful? And so we literally pulled together 300 educators from across the state of Michigan, preschool to high school, teachers, counselors, administrators, principals, every component of the educational system, brought them in, and they walked through a very specific process for them to talk to them about, okay, let's talk about what school ought to look like if we're going to have the resources that we need to make sure that every one of our students are meeting the goals that we've outlined for them. And so that was one component of the way that we looked at this. And then we looked at another component, which was, what they call the evidence-based approach. And what that does is looks at academic research on student performance to identify resources. So we would go to the academic research and say, okay, well, what should class sizes be? What additional resources are needed if you have at-risk students in the school? And so between getting that really qualitative work from the people in the field and also looking at what the research says are the best practices for schools to be utilizing, we then were able to identify and put together this picture of what schools ought to look like. Again, so you're thinking about a funding study. It really wasn't a funding study. It was really a study about what do we need, what does school need to look like in regards to making sure that the resources that are there to meet the needs of those students, and then cost that out. And so that was the thought process behind that, which made a whole lot of sense, as you know, for someone like me who was a practitioner living this every day, because those are the budget decisions that we always had to make. And that is, you know, what's the highest priority? What are the things that are going to have the biggest impact in regards to our classrooms? And so they drilled down significantly into the weeds in regards to everything from what, you know, not just, okay, well, we need professional development. What does that look like? How much release time do teachers need to do their craft? How do they work together? What are the best practices? They outlined all of those things in the report. And then again, they've stepped back and said, okay, well, let's cost this out now. And so that's what the School of Finance Research Collaborative did, to do a very in-depth study in regards to how to build a funding structure for our state. And so again, I highlighted that the state of Michigan actually did one of those methods back in 2016, which was a good first step, but just really didn't dive into the details in regards to what kind of support is needed in a school to make sure that kids can be successful. And so we stepped in and said, okay, let's go ahead and do that professional judgment approach. Let's go ahead and do that evidence-based approach. And we went out and we did RFPs, and we found 2 companies that are top industry experts that have done this in other states, these approaches in other states. So we could get at least what we felt was the best, most in-depth look at how we would want to build a funding structure here in the state of Michigan. And so Augenblick, Palick and Associates did one of the methods, and then Picus Oden was hired to do the other method. And so off they went. We did that research over many months, did it in regards to the process and ways that we said. And then in January of 2018, the results of the study were released. And the study is about 300 pages. I'm proud to say that I actually read every single one of those 300 pages. If you were interested at all, I'm not sure I would recommend that you do that, but I can tell you that if you read the first 25 or so pages in that report, you'll get basically the gist of everything that's in that 300-page report. Why is it 300 pages? Again, because they dealt and dug in regards to, you know, what does professional development look like? How do we determine what kind of resources are needed for technology, et cetera? And so that's detailed out in the 300 pages of the research project. And I'll share with you a link that will allow you to go and take a look at that research if you have any interest in doing that. But that's really was the end result of us trying to answer this question: what does it cost to educate a child in Michigan? And would allow a path for us to look at how we may want to adjust the school funding system in our state. And so I would just highlight with the study that was completed, I want you to know that we actually identified that there were certain components of the study, and in those components, they identified that there's still some additional work to do. And so it didn't get into the facility issues and capital cost issues, which are a real source of disparity between school districts still in our state. in regards to, districts that go for bond issues or sinking funds to do the capital needs in their school districts. So they felt more study needed to be done with that. They also talked about transportation, and they identified about $1,000 per rider as sort of an average cost. But that looks a lot different in the Upper Peninsula, where you have a school district that covers 36 square miles and a school district down in Wayne County, where, they have more students and it's, 3 square miles. And so they felt more study needed to be done there. And they felt there was more study that needed to be done when they look at concentrated poverty in a community, and the fact that there may be even added resources that are needed in regards to dealing with areas that have real concentrated areas of poverty. So, and so the results that they have highlighted and outlined recognize that there needs to be some additional work done there. And so, ta-da, here we are. 300 pages, hours and hours of working with legislators, looking at the best research that these organizations could find, and it came up with these funding formulas for a way to look at how we would want to structure our finance system here in the state of Michigan. And so I would highlight a couple of things when we look at this. This does not include retirement costs. And so their suggestion is that because retirement costs can really be skewed from entity to entity, a school system that has a high salary cost base compared to a school system such as some of our charter schools that aren't required to have their teaching staff in the retirement system, there's a real wide range in regards to those retirement costs. And so their study said you really ought to you need to fund the retirement costs, but you really need to separate that and fund that separately. Because they really wanted to get at this issue of, how do we provide the right resources so we can make school look like the way it looks in the recommendations that they've outlined. And so they've identified, and again, in the report, talks about what they think class sizes should be. How many counselors should you have? Do you need social workers, and how should they be allocated? And it really addresses those issues based on the kids in that school. And so for the first time, it really takes a look at if you had a classroom of 25 students and 20 of them were either at risk, special education, or EL, and 5 of them didn't have those additional needs, compared to a classroom that maybe had 20 students that didn't need those additional needs, and you had 5 students that were EL, at risk, or have special needs. The way that you would fund those classrooms are completely different because the support that they need is completely different. And so that's the way that they built these funding formulas, recognizing that this is about funding the resources that they've identified in the research that should be in place to make sure that all kids can be successful. And so they identified a base cost for every student in the state of Michigan should be at least $9,590 per student. And then they identified for students that are coming in at risk, and they did this by looking at, the typical free and reduced lunch types of allocations and formulas. But they said for every one of those students that are coming into your school that have been identified as an at-risk student, they probably need an additional 35%. And so when you're counting those students and funding those students, instead of $9,590, you might need about $13,000 for those students, because there are going to be additional resources needed to make sure that they have everything that they need to get to those educational goals. For English language learner students, they broke it down in regards to their level of skill as it relates to the English language. And they did it by the WIDA scores. If you've heard about WIDA, that's the test that they provide to EL students to identify how much support they need. And they've identified, as you can see, anywhere from a 35% to a 70% increase in funding for those students that are needed to make sure that they have the resources that they need to meet the educational objectives. And so that's going to be somewhere for an EL student between $13,000 and $17,000 per student. Special education, they broke that down again. The most severely disabled students they identified, as it happens right now, that they should be funded 100% in regards to whatever those costs are for those programs that service the most severely disabled students. And separate from that, they've identified that the mildly impaired students, you think about that being a student that maybe is getting some additional speech support. Maybe it's a student that's going down to the resource room 1 hour a day. Those students who are in general education classrooms for a good portion of their time, but need some additional support, would need about a 70% bump. And then the more moderate students, the students that are have been identified in their IEP of needing some additional support, maybe some basic classroom support when they're in a different classroom for a portion of all of their time, they would need about 115%. And so you can see for special education, you would have anywhere from about $16,000 to $20,000 per student of costs in order to meet the needs of those students. For career technical education programs, that's what CTE is. They've identified that those programs are additional cost programs compared to a regular classroom offering. And so they identified about a 10% bump that you would need for CTE enrolled students. And so for the period of time that they're in a CTE class, they would need about an additional $900 per student to cover those added costs in those career technical education programs. They identified preschool and they said preschool is about $14,000 per student. Why would that be more? Why would that be so high? And so the reason is when you think about a preschool classroom, number one, they believe that preschool teachers ought to be certified teachers, just as are the K-12 teachers. And secondly, they identified in the research that, of course, you have to have lower class sizes and additional support aids in those classrooms to make sure that those 3- and 4-year-olds are able to have the support that they need in those classrooms. And so the big shock number there is really the fact that they're recommending, first of all, they recommend 3- and 4-year-old universal preschool, but they're also suggesting that preschool ought to have the same type of trained and educated teachers as you would have in K-12 classrooms. And so a couple of the other things that you can see in there, they talk about slight adjustments for school systems that are in isolation. So for example, if you go to Northern Michigan, it probably isn't as easy for a school system in Northern Michigan to have a shared program with a neighboring school district because they're so far apart. Their high schools are so far apart, their middle schools are so far apart, compared to, for example, down in my area in Wayne County, where we do all sorts of shared programs with our school districts in a variety of different ways. And so they recognize that and recognize that there's probably some added cost because they're not going to be able to have as many shared programs. And the same with the size adjustment. There's just an economy of scale based on the number of students that you have. And for school districts that are smaller, their ability to, for example, have even class sizes across the board because of the number of elementary classrooms that they have is just harder because they're smaller. And so those are a couple of other things that the report outlined. And again, I would just highlight that these are the dollar amounts that they're talking about, number one, but it's really to fund the activities that are in that 300-page report. And so if we were ever to move to a funding system like this, I certainly would hope that there would be expectations that the best practices identified in the report would be implemented with these additional dollars. The other thing I would mention is that in order to implement something like this, you would never, in my opinion again, you would never want to do this in 1 year. You would never say, okay, well, let's go ahead and increase property taxes across the state of Michigan next year, and let's raise X billions of dollars so we can fund these formulas. This ought to be phased in over a period of time, because if you were to implement all of the recommendations and ideas that are in this report, you can't do that over the summer. There aren't enough teachers and aren't enough counselors even in the pipeline to be able to fund the recommendations that have been identified. And so that would not be an efficient way to do this. Our feeling is that that ought to be phased in over a period of time, and you start to move towards these formulas as opposed to saying we're going to implement these formulas next year. And so that is by and large a summary of what's in the findings. And again, I highlight that these are the dollar amounts that are in the findings, but the real issue is if this money becomes available, this is going to provide the resources as identified in best practices in our schools to increase student performance. And again, just from a sort of a picture standpoint of what this looks like, you can see based on this how the funding system would look different in different school districts and classrooms. This is really about funding the needs of kids as opposed to the way it works right now, where we're still basically going based on the way that schools were funded in 1994 with, trying to get them more equal. This is about equity and about providing the resources to make sure that the kids are successful as opposed to any other measurement. And so again, that classroom of 25 that I described, you can see how that funding level would be different based on the students in that classroom, because the level of need and the types of things that they're going to need are going to look differently. I have to tell you, for any school district in our state of Michigan, a base of $9,590 and having that retirement taken care of separately, it's not going to be a significant reallocation of dollars, but it really is about making sure that all districts and all schools, all charter schools, et cetera, have the resources that they need. Some will get more than others if we move towards the formulas like this, but it's not going to be, at least in my opinion, a complete reallocation of resources across the board, because even for the most affluent school systems, $9,590 plus the additional amount for these additional districts plus the retirement being separate is going to be at least similar, if not better than what they're receiving right now. And so where do we go from here? Really, our effort has been and continues to be education about what the research says. We've been very pleased that the governor has actually implemented with her budget recommendations in her first two budgets. She has implemented these formulas in some manner as a start to move towards a funding system like this. She references the School Finance Research Collaborative research, and that is also happening with legislators. And so we feel that, as you know, often studies end up on a shelf somewhere. We do believe that this research has garnered some level of traction, even though the ultimate budgets that were passed and the amount of total dollars that are available for schools isn't, certainly isn't in a place where we feel like we're taking huge steps moving towards the research that have been identified here. So we're about continuing to push that message and to push that message with policymakers, and at the same point in time, educating just, the education community, the business community, taxpayers across the state of Michigan about what this research says, so that they're up to speed and have a level of understanding, and if they believe in it, can also advocate for moving towards reforming our school funding system as it is today, and moving towards what the research would say would be a better way to fund our schools. And so that's what we're about doing. It's a significant challenge for us to do that outreach. We're looking to really re-energize our efforts right now to make another big push to get it out to stakeholders, knowing that this vernacular and these conversations have begun at the legislative level and certainly is on the mind of our governor. And so, Jeff, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I hope that wasn't too long, or I hope that helped in regards to explaining what the School Finance Research Collaborative is and what its goal was and what it accomplished. And of course, I'm happy to talk and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Randy. We really, really appreciate all the work that this group is doing and you presenting to us this morning. Just, can you send me the PowerPoint so I can send it out to the other council members?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
We'll get that to you. And again, on the last page of the PowerPoint, by the way, www.fundmyschools, fund MI like Michigan, schools, www.fundmyschools.org. That is the website where you can go, and that is the School Finance Research Collaborative website, and you can also access the report there.
Okay, and then before we get to the questions, is there anything specifically that maybe you would want this council to think of or support, or is there a pathway that, or something that you would like us to do in addition to everything you just presented? Is there maybe a specific ask that you would like for this council, or?
Well, absolutely. Anything that you can do. I mean, of course, you're the governor's council, so you have if you are willing to take a look at what I've shared in the research, and if you support the concepts in there, it's a simple message, and that is the School Finance Research Collaborative is a very, very in-depth study that outlines, a new way and a different way to fund our schools. And we strongly support moving towards, again, this isn't an overnight issue, moving towards funding our schools in this manner. At some point in time, it's going to mean additional resources, no question about that. But moving towards this research in the way that we fund our schools, that we strongly support that. And if you can get that not only to the governor's office, who I think are going to say, oh, that's great to hear you guys agree with us. We've been behind that also. But your voice is important. And so through the governor's office or through any other of your own networks that you're part of, if you can share with them, there's this research out there. This is a different way to look at how we're funding our schools. We need to recognize that we've fallen behind in Michigan, and we want to be proactive in regards to doing something different. Any other avenue that you have through your own individual organizations and group that you work with, getting that word out would be very helpful also, those two things.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Mandy, our co-chair, and she for the council, and she's going to run the Q&A session. Thank you again very much for presenting to us today.
All right, everyone. Just so that you're aware, it's 11:18. Our tentative adjournment time is 11:30, so our Q&A might need to be a little bit quick and accelerated. I think the first question we have is from Ruth.
Hi, thank you so much for coming, Randy, and presenting that information to us. I do think, I like it all. I like all of the results. But I did have a question for you, especially because of the teacher shortages that we have. And also the fact that many universities are closing their education programs. So quick question, and then I'll get into some other things. As a part of the report, did you consider increasing funding for teacher education programs at community colleges and at state universities, especially considering the fact that the recommendation includes having preschool teachers be fully certified, just like, upper education teachers?
Yeah, the research actually didn't look at components outside of the educational, classroom, schoolhouse in regards to recommendations. But what I would say regarding your point is that it did look at teacher salaries in regards to not only the recruitment of people into the profession, but also the differences between school districts. And so when you think about a school district that actually has the highest need and the lowest ability often by their pay scales to recruit teachers, that's one of the things that actually the report would identify, that with these additional dollars they're getting, that they would actually improve their salary schedules so they can be more competitive in regards to recruiting teachers.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. And I do think that that probably would be one way to solve this problem of teacher shortages that we have. So yeah, I'm glad that you did consider that as well. I don't know if money is the only thing, but that's just my opinion here.
Uh-huh.
Like you're looking at the money thing and the funding issues, but yeah, I guess like I was especially concerned with the preschool teachers, simply because I run a nonprofit organization up here, and we have a childcare center that we opened here locally because there's such a need for high quality, childcare and preschools in this area. So we were able to do that. But one of the biggest hurdles that we have is meeting, finding employees and teachers that meet the current educational requirements, which most of them are able to get from community colleges, or just, getting a certain amount of credits in an educational field. And so, I mean, that's the only thing, but just seeing, actually, I do want to say also the fact that you did include the $14,000 per pupil, providing universal health or universal preschool for every child in the state of Michigan is very awesome. So
ages 3 and 4.
Yeah, I think that is so great and so needed. And, anytime we asked our legislators, is this something that the state of Michigan would ever consider, 4 years ago when we were planning this childcare center, they were like, no. I mean, it wasn't even on the docket. So the fact that this study did include the importance of early childhood education, kudos for that. And I appreciate that. So
Yeah, and this comes from the research. The research is very clear. If you give kids a preschool experience, a quality preschool experience that meets all the best practices at ages 3 and 4, it will make a significant difference in third grade reading, period.
Yeah, we found that too. We've done the research. So thank you very much for presenting today and for the information.
Okay, I'm looking in the chat and I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. I'm going to give some wait time in case we do have someone who would like to comment.
And I would certainly offer up, Mandy and Jeff, you can share my email with the group. They may have a follow-up question after they go to the website and take a look at the report. They may, look at the PowerPoint and forget a specific item that I had a chance to talk about. I certainly welcome any questions afterwards. Just send me a note and we'll get you an answer.
And thank you so much. I think this is really great information for all of us. I think sometimes when there isn't a question, it's usually because we've gotten so much information, and you're right, it might need some processing time.
Yeah.
Jeff has a question, and then I'll turn it over to Greg to look at the agenda for February.
Okay, I'm putting your email address in the chat as soon as I'm done speaking here. I was just wondering, since can you speak more, because I work at Macomb Intermediate and with special education and center-based education, can you speak a little bit more about special education in this funding model? Just maybe a little bit more in depth that maybe you weren't able to touch on during your presentation.
Yeah. So really, again, what they did is they identified the best practices as it relates to making sure that all of our students have the support that they need if they're a student with needs, and they broke that down in regards to the type of disability they have and the amount of support that they need. And so what they really did was laid out, and for the vast majority of our special education students with an IEP, this is about what kind of support is in their local general education, elementary, middle school, high school, to support them to be successful in a general education setting, right? This is about least restrictive environment as a best practice. This is about making sure that if those special education students are in those programs, do we need lower class sizes? Do they need an additional support in the summer, or do they need additional tutoring? Do they need some support in regards to a reading consultant? They looked at all of those components in regards to making sure that those students in those different categories have their needs met, their needs met. And of course, Jeff, specifically with the types of programs that you participate in Macomb County, which are the most severely disabled students, what they want to do is identify those programs, what they look like, and make sure that they're 100% funded. Right now in the state of Michigan, we're about $800 million short in regards to funding our special education programs. Those programs still exist, which means what happens? Two things. Number one, if school districts are struggling, they're going to take a shortcut where they can to meet the requirements. And number two, the other thing that happens is they have to take the money out of their general education programming. And so And so this level of funding that they've identified believes would really alleviate those two particular issues and get us back into as many best practices as possible. And Jeff, with the programs that you run, making sure that they're 100% funded.
Thank you. And with us supporting this, I guess I would ask that you maybe help out and support, and I'm sorry, council members, but bills 5859 and 5959, which are they are in bill form now, and it talks about having support staff applying for grants, specifically paraprofessionals applying for grants to start their education or to finish their education to get into classrooms, because as this body passed unanimously, we recognize that they are a wonderful resource, experienced group of educators that are already currently in our schools and can step into these roles very quickly with all of that experience that they have in throughout their years in schools and in the varying different roles that paraprofessionals and support staff have. So thank you.
Absolutely support those two bills. Absolutely. The pipeline is one of the biggest issues, period. Pipeline of educators, getting good teachers in our schools. The research, by the way, in this report is very clear, and that is you have to have skilled, trained, supported teachers in classrooms in order to be successful. And it's all built around that.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'm going to turn it over to Greg to discuss agenda items for February.
Thanks again.
Thank you, and send that PowerPoint whenever you get a chance, and I'll get it out to the members. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, well, thanks everyone, especially Manny. Thank you for making it easy for me to manage home life and this council. So I really appreciate it. And you don't give yourself enough credit. That was a very, very smooth meeting, perhaps more smooth than everyone's accustomed to. So thanks again. First of all, I know that, so Ben, I want to make sure, do you feel like you can move forward with finding stuff with Leah's feedback?
Not necessarily on MDE, but I mean, I've got my stuff.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to be able to find it because I just moved it all. So what I would recommend is that when we conclude this meeting, before breaking off, we take about 10 minutes for me to make sure everybody can find everything.
So with the whole group, Leah?
Yeah, we can
Okay.
do training with the whole group and not have to have an open meeting. We're not making decisions.
Okay, so we'll just kind of adjourn and then reform like a training. Okay, thanks. And then Gigi, I think you had something about the minutes that you mentioned.
Thanks, Greg. Greg had indicated to me back in December, following our December 11th meeting, that in fact the recommendation from our council had been sent on to the governor's office. So I was curious as to where we might find that actual document that has been sent over, and what is the protocol for me sharing that news with other library colleagues. And I also wanted to mention, in our December minutes, I did input the information that had been requested by our group back in December as to specific numbers for staffing currently in place in the state of Michigan.
So Greg, I guess I need to back up a little bit. I thought that we shared that with all of the members that we had sent that over. Is that not an accurate memory?
No, I think it was shared.
Did anybody else receive those emails? Because now I'm worried Gigi's not getting the information.
Well, that could have been in the period when Gigi was finding her way around Outlook, but I brought up today when I emailed Greg what, nice words saying, just want you to know, Gigi, that we sent this over to the governor's office.
Okay. So I will make sure you get that again. I will also, so we have a little bit of a transition problem with the folders because you all had the Google Drive And then I had an internal folder where I keep some things to your drafts while I'm making them, sending them through graphics. And then we had the new one. And so I need to get all the things in the right places. I have 2 of those things in the right place, and I might not have the third. So that final document, Gigi, might not be on our SharePoint yet, and I might need to get it there too. But either way, I can definitely resend it and then make sure it gets in the right place, is the long-winded answer. And then I think, I mean, my opinion would be that it's free to share with anybody from the council to anyone. It's a public document. And then you needed the number of the, did you want currently employed library people who are classified as librarians?
No, I just wanted to point out that I added that information to the minutes, and I was glad to see that we had editable rights to the minutes. So I got those in there, and I'm not sure if anybody actually clicked on the link, but it worked. And 509 of usins right now. And really quickly, wanted you to know that Lakeview High School Library has received, again, exemplary status in the SL21 School Libraries of the 21st Century program. And that was, I was allowed to resubmit an application based upon our work from 2017 to 2020. And of course, this year we are in mothballs, but hopefully fall of 2021, the program will be restored.
Okay, thanks, Gigi. So we got to hear a lot of stuff today. We didn't get, all of our voices weren't necessarily heard. And is there anything anybody needed to bring up to the council today that you just didn't, that wasn't built into the agenda for you to have the opportunity to share before we kind of get it to the wrap up here? Okay, well, if something occurs to you, I'll just put it in the chat so we can make sure we get that done. So February right now is looking pretty wide open. We don't actually have anything specific on the agenda, so Leah and her team maybe can get a little bit of a reprieve. So we have a couple options. One is we could leave it kind of open. We could schedule a meeting just to approve today's minutes, and then committee chairs could schedule that breakout time for work. That way it'd be easy to arrange in our school districts for those of us that are held a little bit more accountable, or our administrators are paying more attention. Or we could, if there's anything we do feel that we need to discuss as a whole, or we could have a student representative approve our minutes and then move into committee. So any thoughts? I'll just say personally, I wouldn't mind keeping the agenda just open for committee time so that we have some dedicated time. But if there's anything that needs to be addressed, of course, we do have a fairly open agenda. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, one of the things, not to be a fly in the ointment, one of the things that our subcommittee had talked about is maybe having the February meeting, part of the February meeting, we had talked about having a roundtable with social workers and counselors and having that discussion and inviting Congresswoman Stabenow. I know that's a long shot, but still. But having that discussion, is that something we wanted to not include? I mean, I'm not saying it has to be February, I guess, but that was what we had literally just talked about that. Is that something that we wanted to maybe include into a monthly meeting, or something that needed to maybe be scheduled outside of that? I just think in light of what we just heard with the students' representatives and all of that, I mean, this ties directly into that, into the importance and the need of that. We thought too that the whole council might want to take part in those discussions, giving their individual district needs and all of that. Sorry.
So I just had a comment. The only question I have, and I do think the presentations we're getting are wonderful and they're very needed. However, a lot of what this group does is has active discussion and talking about how we're going to move forward. And I feel like because we've had back-to-back presentations, we're missing a little bit of that time. So my thought would be, and I'm again just brainstorming, if we're going to do presentations that take up the bulk of our agenda, perhaps we need to do those like every other month, so we still have some of that important educator discussion time. But that's just my 2 cents.
So I guess I would just need our subcommittee would need some direction. I mean, we're not totally in favor of one way or the other, but we would need some direction as far as we've been very open about us wanting to have a roundtable discussion with social workers and counselors and this council, whether that happens in February or not, or in a monthly meeting or outside. We just need some direction, I guess, from the body as to how you guys would want that to happen or look or function. And I guess it doesn't have to include the body. I mean, we could hold that, I guess, as a subcommittee. We felt like everybody would want to take part in that discussion.
I'm wondering, do you think it's maybe time that the subcommittees just do a brief update of where they're at? Maybe that would be helpful, just to kind of share out to the whole council of, I know like the one subcommittee I'm on that Ruth is leading has really drastically changed in the last month. So maybe it's time to kind of just share some brief notes that way and have some council discussion about both. I don't know if we have 2 or 3 committees going right now, but just kind of maybe having large group discussions about that.
In February, is that what you're talking about, Kathy? Mm-hmm. I agree.
And I think Zainab had a comment there.
Yeah, I just think that, I mean, I know our subcommittee needs time to work together. I also think that as a whole body, we're not really nimble. We don't get a lot done. So I would like some subcommittee time. I kind of want us to get back to that point where we're ready to like make recommendations to the governor and like see, because I think we've intellectualized and talked a lot, and I learned so much. My head's going to explode today. It was a great meeting. But I know I need to let it marinate, and B, I just feel like things need to get done. I'm in that zone. Sorry. Maybe I'm over caffeinated. I don't know, but that's where I am.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's plan for February. We'll have an hour. We'll plan from 9 to 10. We'll have the meeting minutes. We'll have committee updates, and then just kind of some of that free time where if there's anything we want to bring up, like we haven't talked about, a lot has happened, in the last month, and we didn't, talk about any of that outside of the GEAC stuff at all. And then from 10 until whenever, we'll just leave that for breakout time for committees. And I think, so Zainab, I think we kind of agreed that we try to stick for June to do all 3 committee recommendations together. So that way even committees can kind of figure out how much time you need between, that'll be what, March and, or February, excuse me, and June too. So does that sound, let me see Mandy's comment. I can't read it because it keeps moving, sorry. So does that structure for the agenda sound good? So you can plan on committee time, plan on a brief update before committees meet, and then how much time you want past that 10 o'clock will be completely determined within each committee. And then Jeff, we won't worry about the roundtable. Maybe you guys can talk about that in committee today when you meet, like what that actually looks like and what resources you need from us. We could maybe plan it for the March meeting if that's something you decide that we should all hear.
Okay.
It looks like Ben has a question.
Okay, thanks.
So just to clarify, we are shooting for June as our time to make recommendations for the governor's office, correct?
Yes, but we could adjust that time, and that was kind of in order to sort of stay on the same page. That way, because if one committee finishes early, then it's hard for those people to move on without everyone else. So That could be adjusted, but that's kind of what we had discussed early on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so any other, oh, Ben got his done. All right, looks like we have a structure for February in the works. And it looks like we just will leave off a student guests for February and kind of focus on us a little bit and then get back to the, figure out what we need from people outside our core group here again in March. And if there is nothing else, we could take a motion and then remember, once we adjourn, Leah, do you want everyone or just people that want to stay on for a quick training? How do you want to do that?
I think that it would be helpful to have everyone see the new folders quickly. I promise I don't need to take very long. And then if people have more questions, people can drop off.
Okay, so once we adjourn, we would just stay in here. We don't need to leave or anything.
Correct.
Okay.
And subcommittees can stay in this Zoom after you, Leah? How should that work?
No, Kelly says. So what we need to do is you can either transition to whatever tool that you've been using in your subcommittee, or I can set you up in breakout rooms using Teams.
But yeah, Ben, you could just use your Zoom link, your personal Zoom link that you usually use for Zooming.
Or you can use Microsoft Teams, which you all have access to now. And Kelly's probably going to have to help me with some of this because I don't know how you see it. So, but let's make that part of what we do when we adjourn the meeting.
Okay, that's a good cue to what we could do next. If there's a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Zainab. Is there a second?
I can second.
Seconded by Ruth.
There you go.
Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Okay, we'll approve adjournment by unanimous consent. So the meeting is concluded, and then Leah will take us to a training, which is separate.